G'day guys, back with the Our Circle. A couple of videos back I discussed the evolution of spaceships from roughly now up until the point of 30k. And to do this I had to go through what I felt was a logical progression, a logical set of steps in order to get to that point. Well, what I've also done is written down a sort of dot point history which leads all the way up to that point in the far-flung future. And of course this history begins in the here and now, which is Millennia 1 to Millennia 15, the Age of Terror. Now, the most important thing with this was to use the canon sources for me. So, every actual date of when something happens, such as when artificial intelligence begins to exist, when the first STD systems begin to exist, when the first colonization of extrasolar system planets begins to exist. These dates are known, and they're easy to find on Games Workshop's website. So knowing this is where we get the ages from: the Age of Terror, the Age of Technology, and of course the Age of Strife. After that, of course, we get the Great Crusade, the Horus Heresy, the Scouring, those kind of things. So, we're going to start at Millennia 3, which is what we're in now, which is far Earth stations are established at Lagrange points, acting as a stepping stone deeper into the solar system. Now, Lagrange points are sort of a point in space that is gravity neutral, I guess you can say. There's something like 30 degrees forward and backwards of planet Earth, for example. And there's a few other ones between sort of here and the Sun and here and Mars, that kind of thing, but they're not anywhere near as stable. But essentially what you can do is put an object in that orbit and it'll get dragged along at the same distance from the planet without moving out. So it's a very good place to put stations. The only thing that's going to happen, of course, on these Lagrange stations is that they're going to be subject to a lot more radiation because they're not going to be within the Earth's magnetic field. Now, because of this, I felt the next logical step is that efficient radiation shielding would be developed on these stations, along with improved medical technologies thanks to constant study of long-term effects of being in space. Also, this will allow humans to withstand greater levels of radiation without dying, which will slowly and directly correlate over time with the emergence of mutations, because rather than killing us, they're going to change us. This is important because this is going to take a long time in order to get to the point of having psychers and navigators, things like that. Next, humanity will manage to develop stasis pods, allowing people to be preserved from the effects of time, more or less, and protecting their organs from incredible G-forces that happen during spaceflight. And this will allow people to be preserved from the effects and travel deeper into our solar system. The next great invention will be the development of artificial gravity. Now, there's a few different ways that this could happen. There could be repulsive magnetic fields, there could be hyperdense materials that have more gravity than their size would dictate. Perhaps the sheer size of ships may come into play as larger and larger ships are developed. But we'll assume some sort of technology is invented in the next 500 to 1,000 years. This will mean that crews can go further distances without the debilitating effects of low gravity. And low gravity is a huge deal because it actually has an effect on human genetics. Not only the fact that you get severe muscle atrophy, a loss of calcium from the bones, but also animals that have been bred in space. They actually show genetic deformities that are a result of conception and incubation in a low gravity environment. So it's very important to overcome these things if you want to go out, explore space, colonize other worlds. Now, by combining all of these technologies along with efficient fusion ion engines. Now, ion engines are a thing already, but providing a long-term power plant for them, I think fusion will be the way to go. And so developing efficient versions of that engine will allow humans to travel between the Earth, the Moon, Venus and Mars. Mars will first get colonized in this time, but has to remain very self-sufficient, as lifting objects into orbit is still done with conventional rocketry and is incredibly prohibitively expensive. Humans will then attempt to reach further planets, however no journey will make it beyond Jupiter without the losses of crews. Again, this is just me putting my own little fluff spin into it, because no great scientific achievements or feats of exploration are achieved without loss, unfortunately. Fears about the ethical implications of artificial intelligence will then lead to global agreements not to pursue self-learning programs beyond a certain point. Late in the millennium, first hyperfuels are invented, allowing atmospheric to space flight to be performed with greater ease. This advance leads directly to the increased scale of spacecraft, and specialised services are formed, namely space freighters, colony ships, rescue teams, and limited military assets. The last thing to happen in this millennium will be the first great leap in technology, which is seeking to leave the solar system. Ships are invented that utilise gravimetric drive technology to break through subspace. This ship will be the first to reach Neptune, but disappears without a trace, reappearing several years later. The subspace realm which the vessel entered had a debilitating effect on the vessel and crew, and the gravimetric drive technology is deemed unsafe and sidelined for the foreseeable future. That's the plot to Event Horizon, for those who are wondering, because I think it's a great movie and well worth pointing out as a bit of fan fluff. Alright, so the next millennium. Mars becomes a hotbed of new technology as colonists are forced to create out of necessity. This is because that being far from Earth, people are going to have to be self-sufficient to some degree, and they've been self-sufficient for quite some time. So they're going to undergo their own process of invention. Now keep in mind, being colonised, Mars is probably going to be colonised by wealthy nations or industrial corporations, and the people are going to be sending are going to be vetted and going to be of a very similar mindset, maybe not ethnic background, but definitely the same mindset. That means they're probably going to get along a bit better being professionals put into this situation than what's going to happen back on Earth, which is the Third World War. Now, my theory on the Third World War will be, I guess it's timely, chemical and biological weapons. Different ethnicities are going to be targeting one another, different cultures and countries trying to gain the upper hand by using dangerous weapons and trying to kill one another on the sly. So rather than directly engaging and attacking others, which will result in, mad, mutually assured destruction, nuclear war, that kind of thing, countries will try and release pandemics or poison or sterilize the opponents in other countries. If this sounds horrible, it's because it is, but this is a prelude to Warhammer 40k, and if we could make it 1,000 years without a Third World War, I'll be shocked. But in any case, it will lead to massive losses in lives. Now, keeping in mind what I said earlier, that Mars has become self-sufficient. Well, basic terraforming has begun there, and on Venus by seeding the atmospheres with bacteria and algae, which is a real thing that scientists believe they can do. Obviously, it's hard to test out, but over a very long period of time, these planets will be actually modified by these organisms. Because of the war happening on Earth and just the sheer scale of devastation, Mars will actually slowly begin to outstrip the quality and capacity and capability of Earth vehicles and vessels in this time. And after many decades of war, the survivors of Earth will be unified, more or less, with the assistance of the lunar and Mars colonies, and they'll begin rebuilding. Now, lunar is very important here because I feel that since lunar is the hotbed of genetic modification, cloning, that kind of thing in 30k, or in the Great Crusade, Age of Strife, it would probably start back here, and it would probably be lunar creating humans to act as soldiers and test subjects, that kind of thing, and shipping them to Earth for a fee. They'll get very good at it in this time, and so that's sort of the building blocks being established here. Now, religion and such will still exist, but generally the more extremist elements will probably be lost in the war, because they're going to throw themselves into the fire. It's decided by the New World government that the priority of the species is now to colonise new worlds. In order to try and achieve this, they use gravity slingshots combined with very high mass high-speed, powerful vessels which will allow humans to reach near light speeds and allowing stasis-assisted extrasolar spaceflight to become a possibility. Now, that's a lot to take in, that paragraph. But essentially, if you go at a relatively high velocity, very close to a large planet like Jupiter, you can actually pull in momentum from the gravimetric draw of that planet and use it to help speed you up and slingshot you around the planet. Now, by using a high mass vessel with an already high speed, it's going to take longer for the effects of gravity to pull you back towards the planet after you leave it. Therefore, a high mass, high speed vessel using a slingshot will be able to achieve much higher speeds. And stasis will allow the crews to not be harmed by the high G-forces and to sustain the long travel periods these vessels are going to face. Refinement of this technology late in the 4th millennium will lead to a dramatic increase in size for ships in this time period. The first ships of over a kilometre in length will appear at this time, and the vessels will have a large crew compartment in the forward half of the vessel, along with long gangways leading to nuclear fusion drives at the rear. The first vessels are able to leave Terra for deep space. After a 12-year journey, the vessel New Dawn is able to reach Proxima Centauri system, which is the closest to our own, and over the next 240 years, a permanent space station complex is built in the region, leading to a complex several kilometres long, made up of sacrificial vessels, the station called Galaris. So again, my own little twist on things. Sacrificial vessels. Basically, these ships are being slingshot into this region of space and then docked to one another in order to create a larger and larger space station, much how early space stations were created here. Things like the Salyut space stations, Skylab were parts of rockets. Skylab was part of a Saturn V rocket. They modified the third stage on a Saturn V rocket into a space station. Well, same concept here. They're modifying these vessels, launching them great distances, then joining them up in order to create a space station. It just seems logical if you're going to build something very far away from your actual capability of building. At this space station, subspace generator technology will first be invented. This technology will allow for far greater energies to be drawn from subspace than conventional engines can generate. The technology, however, is deemed dangerous, and the test chamber technicians report strange entities appearing in the area. Cases of spontaneous mutation, madness, and paranoia all take place. However, with much refinement, the technology, if appropriately contained, shows much potential. Essentially, these are warp engines, drawing energy from the warp, and the entities they're finding will be demons, as we would know them in 40k. In Millennia 5, a concerted effort to allow faster travel between stars is taking place, and they will try and reinstate the gravimetric drive project, which will obviously have very dire results. By Millennia 6, it's decided to develop an artificial intelligence program at this time. Previous attempts were previously aborted on ethical grounds prior to the Third World War, as I established earlier, and the system is now designed with several checks and balances in mind in order to prevent the creation of an entity which will be dangerous to mankind. By late in Millennia 6, an acceptable artificial intelligence is created. The system works off feeding data to the unit with a solution requested to that particular problem. The solution is then logged, and the AI responsible for that creation is erased to prevent it from acquiring too much knowledge. So essentially, imagine it like this. You're writing information to a hard drive. You task the computer with solve this equation. It comes up with the solution. You print out the solution, and then that hard drive is erased. That's essentially how the system will work. And that is probably the safest way of implementing AI that I can think of at this time. By Millennia 7, the frequent exposure to radiation and chemical weapon damage to the human genome from the Third World War has over millennia led to various mutant strains. These mutants, considered subhuman, are used as living test subjects in gravimetric drive tests. A certain type of mutant, able to have psychic visions, manages to survive the journey through the subspace realm. The short duration of the journey is partially responsible, however it's theorized that these particular strains of mutant may be able to guide vessels through this warped space. So this is the beginning of navigator genes starting to appear in humanity. By Millennia 8, selective breeding programs are begun by neo-eugenicists in order to breed a more refined and stable strain of navigator mutant. Now remember, the navigator households, they're their own entity, their own self-contained thing, because of the fact that they can guide humanity in 30k and 40k, and they've been long established. Therefore, they need to have a starting point. I think much like in the series Dune, where they're trying to perfect the sort of superior humanoid. Well, it's beginning here. They're noticing that they can actually steer through the warp somehow. So by trying to breed them with one another, they're hoping that they can create a more potent mutant which is able to more safely traverse the warp. Doesn't mean it's not a horrible concept though. By Millennia 9, humanity has grown apathetic. Their needs are met by machinery, and they aspire to littling life, and a slow stagnation of the species sets in. By Millennia 10, humanity has colonised the larger moons and rocky planets of the Sol system, and the Galaris station has become a hotbed for technological development, being situated over 4 light years from Terra. The ability to jettison failed projects from the station, because again, it's made up of multiple spaceships essentially strung together, and the low risk these failures pose to the Sol system has led to this. It means they're doing more dangerous, more risky research on the station, and essentially all of mankind's technology, their technological process and progress is all happening here, because people back on Earth, it's kind of like the Wall-E world. You've got everything you can want in life, you don't have to work for it, and people are just taking it easy, and they're not actually exploring and trying to build their minds. By Millennia 11, mankind has technologically peaked. Without any external input and lacking more powerful energy systems, humanity simply struggles to extend beyond the confines of the Sol and Proxima Centauri systems. This begins the Age of Technology at Millennium 15. By Millennium 15, in an effort to break the technological stagnation striking humanity, scientists now propose the linking of multiple AI systems into a larger communal device. This device continually cycles AI and stores the collected works as a series of templates. The templates are used to create standardized items with locally sourced materials. This is the first standard template construct device, and will become the basis of further such devices in the future. So, Millennia 15, STC, has to occur in this time period. This is laid out by Games Workshop, therefore this is the point where it happens. The complexities of long-distance space travel are beyond the scope of humanity to fathom within one lifetime. Essentially, our brains just can't take in the information required to make this goal happen, even with computer assistance. Therefore, the task of reaching further stars is now handed over to the STC system with a programmed aim to devise a solution to interstellar travel. By Millennia 16, a breakthrough by the STC on Galaris Station leads to the first subspace warp generator with spatial shielding. The successful shield system is named after the station, a Gala field. The gravimetric drive technology is coupled with powerful new warp generator and Gala shielding in Millennia 16, allowing for safe subspace warping. Journeys are limited by a lack of navigational technology, and the STC cannot solve this problem, as it's not a technical problem, it's a matter of it being a psychic mutation problem. It's actually proposed now by the neo-eugenicists that the mutants they have selectively bred over the last 8 millennia can be utilised as a living guidance system. By Millennia 17, repeated testing and much failure leads to the successful implementation of these navigators and gravimetric drive technology. By Millennia 18, subspace warp travel is invented proper by combining these gifted mutant navigators, Gala field technology, gravimetric drives, and powerful warp field generators. Stasis technology is also now no longer required for crews and is only used for additional safety. In Millennia 18, humanity begins to spread amongst the stars. Colony ships are designed by the STC systems, and the STC system provided on each and every one of these new ships, so that when these colony ships land, they'll have an STC with them to meet their needs. Also in Millennia 18, humanity will meet the first alien species, such as the Eldar, which are met at this time. However, the stagnant empire is already beginning to withdraw to the heart of their empire, which is in decline. Now again, these dates are laid out by Games Workshop. First colonization of other worlds is happening in Millennia 18. We first meet Xenos in Millennia 18. No choice about it. Millennia 19. The first conflict arises as humanity meets the Orcs. The Orcs had previously been kept in check by the Eldar, who strictly controlled their numbers. But with the apathetic Eldar becoming more insular, the Orcs begin to spread like a cancer across the stars. By Millennia 20, the First Interstellar War is begun by humanity against the Orcs. All attempts at diplomacy fail. The Orcs have no set hierarchy, killing their leaders just lets another Orc leader rise in their place. Despite the Orcs sharing no unified command, they are slowly driving humanity back as they are bigger, stronger, and their technology, whilst crude, is highly effective against humanity's fragile vessels. By Millennia 21, humanity is on the verge of defeat. Despite the best efforts of the STCs and mankind's most gifted scientists, planet after planet falls. Man for Orc mankind is coming off worst, and it is proposed by radicals to unleash AI-powered robotic combat units. By Millennia 21, the first AI robotic infantry are produced. These first men of iron are clunky and crude, but in battle prove consistently able to not only outperform humans, but are able to maintain themselves and even thrive, fashioning their own spare parts from whatever scraps lie around. By Millennia 22, the Navigators become a higher class of humanity. Their essential nature has turned them from unwilling pawns to a manipulative overclass of their own. So because they're so essential to long-distance spaceflight, they're now valued by humanity, as opposed to being a tool used by humanity. Later in Millennia 22, humanity decisively beats the Orcs, wiping them out of thousands of systems. Mankind begins to spread like a plague, with humans reproducing like rabbits, with their every need and even their very protection placed into the hands of the Men of Iron. By Millennia 23, humans have spread rapidly across the stars. Their fleets composed of varying starships conceived by the STC systems. Worlds which were themselves colonies only a few thousand years ago now run their own colonization programs, with third and fourth and fifth generation colonization happening. By Millennium 24, however, the first schisms appear. With no external threats to worry them, different worlds begin to vie for power and independence from others, and humanity begins to divide. This leads to the 25th to 30th millennium, the Age of Strife. By Millennia 25, the Age of Strife begins. The Men of Iron are turned against one another by humans. Rapidly, as the AI tries to outdo AI, the Men of Iron become too self-aware, and it is judged that the greatest threat to their masters are their masters themselves. Humanity must be governed as cattle for their own safety. Humanity is in chaos, as across the varied worlds of humankind, Men of Iron rise up in coordinated assaults, overthrowing planet after planet. Humans from the inner worlds, not dependent on the Men of Iron, as they trusted to their distance from the edge of the galaxy as a shield, lead the main resistance against the Men of Iron. The death and suffering of so many humans leads to increasingly unstable warp storms and spontaneous mutations now begin to wreak havoc across the entire galaxy, as well as different Xenos threats moving in against humanity. By Millennia 26, the Men of Iron are for all intents finally defeated. However, humanity had to bring overwhelming force to each engagement. But the sheer numbers of mankind have dictated the war. There is no time to reunify and celebrate, as warp travel has become virtually impossible. Warp cults and rogue psychers across the Milky Way shatter the unity of mankind. By Millennia 27, Terra is a ruin. Mars is isolated. Xenos races plunder the ruins of humanity's first naive and idealistic empire. By Millennia 28, Mars, which has remained more or less intact relative to Earth, seeks to reunite with other worlds and launches various arcs into the void, attempting to contact other worlds. The few that survive this journey will become the Forge Worlds. This, of course, leads us to the actual Unification Wars. So, all these things laid out in the timeline, things that happen, such as the Age of Strife, the Men of Iron turning on us, Xenos attacking Earth when the first arcs are sent out from Mars to become Forge Worlds, all this is basically by the book. All I've done is try to fill in the gaps in this episode. So, what do people think about it? Do you think this is vaguely plausible? Do you think it actually fits into the universe of 40k? What do you think needs changing? Because, I mean, there's a lot of big gaps here. Like, it takes us essentially another 14 millennia before we even start to get to the point where we can colonize other worlds and develop STCs. That's a very long time, but it's maybe not how I'd have had it, but it has to happen that way in order for us to match up with the canon. And I think matching the canon is very important, so this is my attempt at trying to fill in the blank spots of what I think should happen over this time period. What do you think? Write it in the thoughts comment below. I do want to talk about it more in the future. And Mac with the Outer Circle, thank you all for watching this episode. I'll see you all next time.